So this is lesson 12, Scaffolding Presentational Communication. And in this module, we're going to be focusing on how we help learners to share information and ideas and opinions. And we'll just touch briefly on using technology to help scaffold presentational communication as well. So when we're thinking about asking students to share with a public audience, quite often that is going to involve some kind of writing. And so one thing that we have to think about before we start worrying about the scaffolding piece is what we're actually going to have students write or produce. And giving them mentor texts or examples of someone who's done it well so that they understand the genre well enough to produce it, as we talked about in the interpretive communication section. So when we think about the phases that we need to worry about, most of the time when a language teacher thinks about helping students write, they tend to focus on all of the accuracy issues. And we tend to go in and mark up students' papers based on grammatical errors and that sort of thing. And yet that is really the least important part of what we need to do when we're trying to scaffold writing. Because most of what makes for quote unquote bad writing or writing that's at low levels of proficiency is that learners have not had opportunities to have their brainstorming structured or the writing itself structured for them. And in fact, a lot of the research on writing suggests that generating ideas is actually one of the hardest things for learners to do. So we can help them with that in a variety of ways. This is an example of how I might give students picture prompts and ask students to take those picture prompts and generate in small groups. So I might have these pictures posted around my room or around the classroom somewhere. And I'm going to have students go around in groups of 2 or groups of 4. And when they get to a picture, I'm going to give them either index cards or Post-it notes and ask them to respond to a prompt. So maybe my first prompt is identify as many things in this picture as you can, as many activities as are happening that you see. So to pay, to talk, to sing, to play guitar. I might have them identify the nouns in the picture or the adjectives in the picture, describe this picture. So it's noisy, the man is rich, they are talented. So each time they shift from one picture to the next, they are generating more vocabulary based on words that they already know in collaboration with their group. So by the time 4 different groups have passed through a picture, the picture is going to have a lot of Post-it notes on it. Then I can ask students to start writing about that particular picture. Okay, now take all of the Post-it notes that are on this picture and see if you can make 3 sentences out of them. Then in the next pass, okay, now that you've made these sentences, I want you to put them in a logical order. And if you have to add extra sentences to make it logical, that's okay. So that over time, I am progressively scaffolding their ability to use their own language to develop the writing that I want them to do. So here would be an example of some culturally authentic images that I might use. Maybe we're going to be talking about in our project some kind of education in Japan, for example, versus in the United States, and what we can learn from each other about innovating in our educational environments. So maybe I'm going to have some pictures like this, and students are going to complete their picture walk based on the pictures like this. And then maybe I'm going to have interactive activities where we are drawing things that have happened in those pictures, or things that I might expect to see in a backpack in the United States versus in a backpack in the target country. And then we could go on to talk about what those things tell us about the educational system, or things that are a little more conceptual. I might have a rubric that I'm going to use to evaluate students' interactions in that context. So did they use ask or answer questions using the appropriate phrases? Did they, were they understood? Were they able to speak in Japanese, etc. Now, this would be an example for an elementary teacher, but it would be very easy to adapt for middle school or high school or university level. I might want to think about ways that I can build language progressively. So maybe I'm going to form a group of 4, listen to the topic, and then students are going to generate words related to the topic, or they can correct each other's errors. Then they're going to form a sentence based on those individual words. And then I'm going to start working on more complex sentence structure by asking them to combine the sentences. So this could be for any topic. This could be natural disasters. So maybe they're going to brainstorm as many words as they can think of related to natural disasters. Then with a partner, they're going to make a sentence out of some of those words and another sentence out of some of those words. And then on the 5th pass, I'm going to ask them to combine the sentences using conjunctions, transitional words and phrases, etc. So that I'm progressively teaching them how to expand how to move from what they know toward more sophisticated types of communication. I can scaffold the organization of a presentational project by giving them a pathway through the project. So for example, let's say that I am doing a project like one that was demonstrated in the symposium where students are writing a story. So they're going to be writing some kind of adventure story. So they have a series of choices that they have to make in order to accomplish that task. And those choices might include, okay, where is the story going to be set? So maybe I'm going to give them 2 different choices that reflect the 2 partner schools that we're working with. So are you going to write for the group in Spain, or are you going to write for the group in Venezuela? Okay, now that you've chosen where that story is going to take place, in terms of the country, what kind of biome is it going to take place in? In the forest, on an island, or in the mountains? And once you've made that decision, what's going to happen in the story? What's going to be kind of the big exciting thing? Is it going to be a dangerous animal, an interesting idea, a famous person, or a magical object? And then what's going to complicate the situation? Are we going to go to a party or a fight, or is there going to be a problem or a robbery or a surprise? And where is that going to end us up? And so you can kind of walk students through the choices that they need to make, because they go through and circle 1 for each row, and then they know what their plot is. And then that makes it much easier for them to generate whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. You can do the same thing with informational texts that you might want them to generate. You can structure the organization. Now, for younger learners who don't know how to structure a paragraph, maybe they need something more like this, where, okay, we're going to be talking about teeth and we're doing some sort of project related to dental hygiene and animals or something along those lines. And so the topic is animal teeth. And then we need to figure out what is our main idea. And then we're going to identify the key details. And so simply having a visual organizer for what it is that they're trying to say or to summarize can be a dramatic help in helping students to structure their thoughts. You can use foldables or manipulatives. And if you click on the link, it will take you to a website with lots and lots of examples of these. Here's a simple one made from file folders and index cards. And so the idea here is, once we have kind of the main idea of our text that we want to write, then I'm going to put key details for each paragraph on a separate index card. And maybe I'm going to gather those from different groups in the class who are working on different aspects of the project, so that by the time I'm finished, I essentially have structured the paragraphs, the information that goes in the paragraphs in the order that they need to go. This is also an easy way for students to start to make lists of processes or flip charts, you know. So let's take the emergency example we were talking about before. Maybe they're generating a set of instructions for what to do in an emergency, and they are putting information for different kinds of emergencies on each of the different index cards. I can scaffold the structure that I want students to use. So I can clone a poem or a story by simply taking out keywords from the poem. And maybe we're going to start with a journal entry where they answer So in this case, we're talking about the concept of love. So what is love to you? And they're responding to that. And then in the bottom half, we show them a simple poem where we've removed the keywords, and they're having to make predictions. So love said the rose is, well, what would you say if you were the rose? And they're going to write that in. Love is blank, said the droplet of water, and so on and so forth. So they're making predictions, which sensitizes them to the structure. And then we show them the whole poem so that they can see what the original author intended. And then they're going to write their own poem using a similar structure. We can do similar types of things with a process called word bowl poetry. So maybe I'm going to take a culturally authentic text and photocopy it, and I'm going to cut up the copy and put the words in a bowl. And then students are each going to take a pinch of words from that bowl, and they are going to use those words to create a poem based on the words that they pulled out of the bowl. So here would be an example of what that might look like. So maybe I'm reading a text about race or about history, and maybe it's even an informational text. And you can see that I'm not giving every single individual word. Some of these are phrases, and students are having to arrange the phrases in order to form a poem that expresses their own meaning about that particular topic. But that would be an example of how I'm going to carefully scaffold the development of the poem. I can have them use concept maps to do this same thing. So they are putting the main idea in the middle. On the lines represent different relationships. So a concept map represents the relationships between concepts and between ideas, and I can see that concepts and ideas have to be connected. So with this kind of a concept map, I can kind of set up the sentence structure, and they're putting into the boxes their own words and phrases. Alternatively, I could have them summarize something that they're trying to share with an audience, or prepare to summarize something that they're eventually going to turn into some kind of public product using a concept map like this that helps them figure out the relationships of the ideas. This is one of my favorites. It is a graphic organizer from a textbook, a basic textbook in a Spanish-speaking country. And the idea here is that they are trying to show students how the genre of argumentative text works. So it tells them argumentative texts are texts that defend an idea or a thesis. And then it says they have to be convincing, easy to understand, so that they contain numerous reasons or arguments that support the thesis that's being defended. And then it lists what those are. They can use facts or figures, statistics. They can give concrete examples or opinions from experts. Then it goes on to talk about how the style is clear and simple and precise. The sentences are short. There are not a lot of ambiguities. There are not questions in the thing. And then you go on and talk about the structure. This is the structure, and this is the purpose of each of those pieces. So a student can kind of look at this and then start to see how they're supposed to organize their own text. Here's an example of a student poem that even a very beginning level student was able to write about her own experiences after engaging in a project related to immigration and migration. And her poem talks about how her father left when she was young, and she and her mother were alone, and she learned to live on her own and take care of herself. And then her sister was born, and how her little sister was her responsibility to take care of, and that when she got sick, her little sister got sick, she didn't go to school because she had to learn how to be responsible. And so she's communicating a lot of really critical pieces about herself in sort of a free form poetic genre based on the things that she learned in her unit. The last piece is, how do we embed scaffolding for the presentational communication in the rubrics themselves? So this would be an example of maybe students are trying to express opinions as part of their final project. And so I'm going to give them not only what an effective argument would look like, based on level 1, 2, 3, and 4, with 4 being the best, but in the box below, I'm giving them some language that they might want to use in order to say whatever it is that they need to say. Now we're ready to think a little bit about technology. And so the idea behind technology is that we want to make sure that we have thought through all of the pieces in order to make sure that it's well scaffolded so that when students go to produce their products, they have those things in mind. So the first thing we have to do is figure out what the task or the product is and identify what category of tools students need. Then they need opportunities to pre-evaluate, or you need opportunities to pre-evaluate the tools. So is it economically viable? Is it functional? Is it easy to use? And you might organize the tools in terms of what's easiest to use. Then you can allow your learners to choose a tool, and you're going to divide the task into steps and generate step-by-step instruction sheets that help them to provide these high-quality produce these high-quality products. You're going to teach them how to use the tool's features to accomplish each step, and you'll want to help them know how to find the shareable links or embed codes so that they can share their product once they have finished. It's really important to have them establish conventions for naming and saving their files so they don't overwrite each other's stuff, and then they can share the product. That brings us to the end of this set of webinars. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling like your brains have been fried because there has been a lot of information here. The idea here is not to overwhelm you or to make you feel like you're a bad teacher if you're not doing all of these things. The idea is to give you enough possibilities of different options and ways to think about scaffolding, so that as you start looking at your own texts and your own project and the kinds of communication you want your own students to engage in, you have some ideas for where you might start. And I would encourage you, as you think about it, to remember that building scaffolding into your practice, whether it's project-based language learning or anything that you're doing, is a lot like building with Legos. You are going to do it one piece at a time. But understanding that the thinking is in many ways much more important than anything that you might actually do in terms of the language can dramatically improve what your students are able to accomplish with the language. We will leave all of the scaffolding sheets and things to help you think through these ideas in the modules, and best of luck as you apply this to your projects. Thanks for being here this afternoon.